in a club, all this nonsense, basically. I mean, I think it's a perfect marriage.
It is, and it is. I use the term sycophants, but it is.
Yeah. It's this
it's
faux altruism.
Let me put it this way. I really like Paris Saint-Germain. I don't love Paris. I don't use the term love unless I really mean it. Like, to me, I don't think you should use the term love when it comes to sports teams. It's not my way. Like, you love people, you love your family, you love your wife, you love your kids. You don't love a football team. To me, it's not normal. Here's the thing, though. Here's what we will say. There are negatives. If we're going to be fair about it, there are some negatives to what he does. And I'll start off with my Neymar negatives. I think that because he's had a bit of a sheltered life, in the sense that he's been destined for something for a long time, he had to work really hard for it, obviously. So does anybody who achieves that. You know, just because you're the chosen one doesn't mean you don't have to work. It means you probably have to work even harder. But I do think there's an aloofness sometimes to how he's perceived, and I think whether you find this trait admirable or not, I think he feeds into some of the things that people don't like about him or that rub people the wrong way. I think he sometimes unwittingly plays into that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I agree. I completely agree with that. I think it becomes difficult to defend him sometimes because of the way that he acts. None of it is like fatal, but I think you're right. I mean, I think a more self-aware person would change his behavior, but that's just not his way. He just doesn't care, so he doesn't do it, right? So it's up to – he's not going to defend himself. He doesn't give a fuck, right? You know what I mean? So it's up to other people to defend him, and he doesn't always make it the easiest. I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think it comes a lot from – and this is his stubbornness, which is he's not someone that – he does show vulnerability, but it's in that sort of – and this goes to sort of another controversy at the World Cup when they beat Costa Rica, I think, 2-0 or something. And he
2-0.
gets on his knees and starts crying. And everyone's just like,
I remember that.
Here's the thing. I'm not going to be a psychologist. And I think a lot of the journalists and pundits decided to be pop psychologists and go, Neymar shouldn't be crying. Neymar shouldn't do this. Neymar shouldn't do that. He's being a phony. Those tears are fake. I don't understand how you can say that somebody's tears are fake unless you are the actual person. Look, the dude does cry a bit. Like, that's okay. You know, I'm not somebody that's going to be like, oh, you have to, there's no crying in football. To me, if you're that person, you're that person. And I feel like Neymar is that person who, after, scoring a goal and beating Costa Rica, and would just all of a sudden start to cry. I could believe that. Some people are like that. Some people's personalities. Some of my friends are like that. I remember one guy specifically. I'm a teacher, and he's one of my teacher friends, and he reads this book to the kids every year, and he's read this book for 15 years. And at the end of it, every time he cries. Every time. He's read the book for 15 years. He knows it's coming. Yet he cries every time. That doesn't make him less of a man or less of a or it doesn't make him less of anything. It's just, that's who we are as people sometimes. Sometimes we get triggered by certain things that happen to us. And I thought that was interesting because I think, yes, do I believe the tears are real? Yeah, I do. Here's the thing, though. You're Neymar. You know the cameras are there. You know the cameras are there. There's a guy on the field with a camera. You know he's there.
Yes.
If I'm the right PR thing to do in that case is if you're crying, wipe your face off, try to pretend like you're holding it back. Like, if he had done that, if he had just said, I'll cry, but I'm going to hold it back. And I'm going to, shake everybody's hand, and, I'll hold it back, I'll try to keep it in, and then go into the locker room, let it all out, and we'll be okay. As I said before, he knows the cameras are there. So
right.
It's this dramatic, hands to the face, drops to his knees, and now it's a spectacle. Whether that was his thought process of, I'm going to make a spectacle out of myself, I don't think that's what he was thinking. But he has that tendency with his emotions and with his face, in the way he reacts to things. It looks like he's making a spectacle of it. And that turns people off. And I understand why that turns people off.
Yeah, but I do think, Mark, this is one of those things that I think often comes like sans context, right? I mean, I think one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is, I think, the monumental weight of the shirt that he carries. Being the number 10 for Brazil is the most I believe it's the most prestigious shirt to wear in all of sports. Like, forget wearing any club jersey, forget playing for the Yankees, forget playing for the Lakers. It is being the number 10 for Brazil, in my opinion, is the biggest weight of any athlete can bear. And I think you have to understand that it's not just the normal weight of a number 10. It's the weight that we talked about earlier, where he's the second coming of Pele and he's responsible for delivering a World Cup to Brazil. And so I think his enhanced emotional nature, I think, comes from the fact that so if you walk down the streets of Sao Paulo or you walk down the streets of Rio de Janeiro on any day of any week, you will see someone wearing a Neymar jersey, a little kid. And I think he feels that. I mean, he's human. He's a human being, and he understands the pressure that he's under. I mean, remember when they played the national anthem before the Croatia-Argentina game, and Messi was already sweating? He feels it too. I mean, this is part of it, right? And I think that there's an emotion, and Neymar is much more emotional than Messi. He's Brazilian, and so, it's his way. And I think that is part of the missing context, is that you have to consider the incredible amount of pressure that he's under, and it's not normal pressure. No, so you can't compare it to anything else. You really can't. And so, I agree. I mean, maybe he should have waited to go in the locker room or whatever. But the other piece of it is that he just came off dealing with an injury that many doctors said may preclude him from playing in the biggest World Cup of his entire life. Right. So. There's a lot there. I mean, there's a lot that's baked into those tears that we're not seeing,
And I don't want to make this mistake. I agree with you. I totally agree with all of that. But this is also the part of it, too, which is when you are a brand and you are this sort of global superstar, at some point, as that global superstar, as that brand, not as a player, but as a company, you have to understand PR. And it's something that Ronaldo understands. It's something that Messi understands. Maybe Neymar's still a bit young to get it. But I'm not going to tell him to deny his emotions and what he feels and the pressure, because that's not my business.
Yeah.
But my business is when, as an athlete, you are under a microscope and people are looking for reasons to not like you, there has to, at some point, yes, and I believe he can do both. He can walk his own path and do things that are good for his public relations. I think you can do both. I think when you get experienced enough and when you're smart enough, you can maneuver both ways. You can be an individualist. You can do what you want. You can play how you want. But you can also be wise to sort of how you're perceived, and sort of, as I would say, what would not, how do I explain this? Like, when you understand self in that sense of, if I'm Messi and I'm thinking, okay, what does Messi do in this situation? What does Messi say in this situation? Or if I'm Ronaldo, what does Ronaldo say here? What does Ronaldo do? You know, the pulling up of the shorts, the free kick, the running to the corner, the jumping celebration. It's all choreographed.
Yeah.
Because Ronaldo knows who Ronaldo is.
Yes.
And I think that another example of it is Zlatan. Zlatan knows who Zlatan is. It's a gimmick that's based in his real life. It's based on what he really believes about himself. But he turns the volume up to a 10. So people accept it. Yeah, is Zlatan arrogant? Yeah, but that's Zlatan. It's part of the gimmick. You know what I'm saying? With Neymar, he doesn't have a gimmick except that he's Neymar. There's no, I guess the word would be pattern to what he does sometimes.
Yeah.
He's somebody that lives off of his own emotions, and he lives from moment to moment. When it comes to what he does on the field, definitely not what he does off the field, because he's incredibly cerebral off of it. But on the field, a lot of that business savvy and that cerebralness that he has in his head goes away, and he just becomes a player. And he becomes
he wants to win. Like, that is the most important. I mean, he is singular focused, like the bull with the red blanket, like we talked about at the very beginning of this.
But that's the whole thing, though, which is he is a bull, and when he gets fouled, or he gets nearly fouled, or he gets barely grazed, he goes down, he rolls on the floor, he sits there for 10 minutes, and then he gets up and he keeps playing. People don't like that. People hate that. And it's the one thing you always hear, because it's the one concrete thing that you can hate about Neymar. Of all the sort of hypothetical and sort of high concept stuff we've talked about, and we've talked about a lot of that in our nearly 2.5 hours, the one thing that you can say that's concrete is the embellishment. And when he goes down and he's rolling on the floor like he just got shot, it's not self-aware, because he's doing it. He's not thinking about, he's not thinking about his brand, is what I mean. When he does that, he's not thinking like a businessman. He's thinking like a fierce competitor who just hates to lose and will do anything possible to win. And on one hand, as a society, we like that. And we applaud it. But on the other hand, when it's somebody we don't like, or it's a tactic that we don't particularly appreciate, we shit all over it.
Right.
That's our hypocrisy more than it is Neymar's hypocrisy. And I've said this too, and this is a line I really wanted to get in here. What we think about Neymar says more about us than it does about him. What we think of Neymar says more about us than it ever does about him. Because in certain ways, Neymar is constant. But in other ways, he's inconsistent in that consistency. In that he's not thinking like a player who has a brand to protect. He's thinking like a competitive animal. So when he's flopping on the floor, I think someone has to pull him aside and go, whoever can talk to him and pull him aside and go, I understand why. I get all the reasons. But if your goal is to be the next global superstar when Messi and Ronaldo retire, if you want to be that guy and you don't want to be passed by Kylian Mbappe or Paul Pogba or God knows who else, this is something that as a businessman you have to take out of your game. Not because, and let me make this clear, not because it's bad for the game, not because, not because
other
of
players
some
don't do it.
Yeah, not because of some unwritten rule that Craig Burley came up with in 1991. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has nothing to do with Gary Lineker or Stevie Nicol or Dan Thomas or Tim Vickery or any of these people, don't stop flopping because of them. Control it because as a brand, it will make you more money if there isn't this sort of specter of he's a diva who flops. It's a business decision for me. Your thoughts on the embellishment and the flopping?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying. I really do. I mean, I think it's the hardest thing to defend. As someone who is keen to defend Neymar, I think it's the one thing that is concrete. That's a great way to put it. It's concrete. It's visible. It's tangible. This other stuff is macro and it's more ineffable, vague, difficult to explain. But the flopping is something that I think most people are able to get behind very easily, simply because of just simply because it's right in front of your face. But, I think, again, like everything else in this life, there's context to be gained here. The Brazilian league is a very physical league. Most South American leagues are. That is, Europeans like to talk about how physical the league is, but it's nothing compared to what happens in South America. Neymar joined the Brazilian league when he was 17 years old. I don't think that a shirt properly fit Neymar until he was about 23, to be honest. When you look at old photos of him, the shirt's always too big because he's not like Messi. Messi's small, right? But his center of gravity is very close to the ground. Neymar is taller and thinner, is more wiry. And I think when Neymar joined the Brazilian league, he got roughed up. He's very quick. His legs move very quickly, and he moves very quickly. And I think that one of the ways that people realized they couldn't keep up with him. And so one of the things that they would do is they would foul him instead. And Neymar realized at a very young age, and you see this also with Rodrigo Goes, who plays for Santos currently. If he didn't embellish, he wouldn't get calls. And I don't mean getting calls in the form of having fouls called for him. I mean in the form of referees actually punishing people who are not actually trying to tackle him. They're trying to stop him by tactically fouling him every time he touches the ball. So Neymar realized at a very young age that embellishment was the best way to get yellow cards, for better or for worse. I'm not, for better or for worse. And I think that's why he does it now. And like you say, it's not the scourge of the game or anything like that. It's his way of trying to manipulate. Not even manipulate. It's his way of trying to convince referees to get the protection that he deserves, the protection that the likes of Messi and Ronaldo also get. But I do agree with the sentiment that if he wants to be a global brand, he has to cut it out of his game. He has to make changes that are more acceptable to the viewing public. But at the end of the day, one of the themes I think of our conversation today has been he doesn't care. It just doesn't matter to him. You know what I mean? I think watching the Belgium game, within 5 minutes, Fellaini elbowed him in the head, and it was intentional. Watch the replay. It was absolutely intentional what he did. That is how players have determined that they can best stop Neymar.
Yeah.
By just taking him out physically. If referees aren't going to protect him, it's sort of this like never-ending slippery slope, right? If referees aren't going to protect him, Neymar's going to embellish the calls. When Neymar embellishes the call, the referee's less willing to protect him. And I think that the World Cup turned into this massive slippery slope. You know what I mean? And I don't know what the answer is for it, to be honest. I really, really don't. And I think it reflects poorly on a lot of people. But I think that there is context to be gained. But you're right. As long as he wants to follow in the footsteps of a Messi, of a Ronaldo, he has to make some form of change.
The adjustment for me is just simply you can do. It's the beginning part. I don't necessarily think is a big deal. Like, if you get touched, if you get fouled, you can go down. To me, you're allowed to go down. The issue becomes when you start rolling. And you start... And look, I understand that people have different pain... There's a difference between a pain threshold and, like, a pain tolerance. Like, there's a difference between somebody with a pain tolerance. Okay, so for example, there are people who, when that tear their ACL, that continue to play on the torn ACL. They feel it pop. It's a little dull pain, but they keep playing on it. There are people that bang their ankle and they scream like they've just been hit with a hatchet. That's just medical science. Now, I'm not saying that you can put this all down to medical science, but there is something called a low pain tolerance. And I think Neymar generally has low pain tolerance. When he gets hit, he feels pain. That's just how he is. And there's a lot of people that when they get hit, they feel pain more than somebody else. Doesn't mean they're weaker, doesn't mean they're lesser of a human being. It means that you have a low pain threshold, a low pain tolerance. So if that's the case, there's nothing you can do about that. But it's the rolling on the floor stuff that now it's almost like it becomes comedy. It becomes slapstick. Like, the reaction is you laugh. Like, that's my reaction. Like, there's two reactions.
That's mine too.
You laugh.
Yeah.
I laugh at it. It's like, it's so stupid. But it's like, it's vaudeville. It's slapstick. He's doing a Buster Keaton bit. He's rolling on the floor. That's an old reference. Look it up. But other people just get mad. They get angry at it. Like, it's personally offends them.
Yes.
Now, that's the bigger problem than the people laughing at it.
No, I completely agree. Because then they just, like, go all out.
You just have to turn it down a little. Yeah. Just get fouled, get on the floor. You can hold your leg in pain, but don't do the 8 rolls or the one when he gets and I guarantee that stomp by the Mexican player was 100% intentional.
Yeah.
Absolutely it was. But the fact that he started doing the roll, I think the referee goes, I'm not giving this card. Because if he had not done that, if he had just, like, held it in pain and said, ref, he just stepped on my leg, please check it out, or that the other players had sort of taken up for him, the ref would have gone under, would have looked at it, and probably would have given a yellow, maybe a red. But because Neymar started rolling on the floor like he was doing a comedy bit, like it was, Chris Farley on Saturday Night Live, all of a sudden now the ref goes, I'm not giving this faker a call. That's the first thing you think, because that's just human reaction. So that's to me where I think he has to fix that. Now, a lesser thing, but I still think a thing that he'll have to figure out is sometimes I think sometimes he's not good at showing his disgust for things. And this goes into the Cavani-Neymar penalty thing, which we'll talk about. Which I think kind of was patient zero for this.
Yes, I completely agree.
And I think this is one of those things that shouldn't have been a big deal. It should have been a day-long story and it should have ended. That Unai Emery handled really badly. That I think
my gosh, yes.
Both of them handled.
Unai Emery is like more responsible than probably any other person in my opinion. But
it was handled. It was handled poorly by I think everyone involved.
Yes.
But this is a thing that happens in sports sometimes. Neymar, I think rightfully so, should have the expectation that if he's being brought to a club for over 200 million euros, he's being given the number 10, he's being given the big push, the marketing push, he should take the penalties. I think he's within his right to think that. Now, this is something that I don't think Unai Emery as a coach was exactly equipped to plan for. Edinson Cavani is incredibly popular with the PSG fan base, like ridiculously so. And the fan base saw it as this sort of defiant sort of act against one of their own. And the coach didn't come out and sort of clarify what that was, which was a misunderstanding, that Everyone could see it. Neymar didn't hide it. He didn't try to hide it. He visibly showed his disgust with Cavani. And I believe that those two eventually solved it. They talked through it. Cavani gave in, and quite frankly, Neymar should be taking the penalties. He's a better penalty taker than Cavani is.
Yep.
So they solved it, but not until sort of the damage was done.
I think you're right. No, I think I just think it was another case though of the media prolonging things. I don't think Dani Alves helped out Neymar a ton either. I think that like holding the ball behind his back for Neymar was just like it's just. But you know what? Dani Alves did that. It wasn't Neymar didn't do it. You know what I mean? It was Dani Alves that did it. But I think it becomes associated so much with Neymar. To be honest, Mark, I think for us to fully discuss, I think this one will need probably more time. And I'm, to be candid, running short of it at the moment. So there are a couple other things that I think we probably need to discuss. Can we put more time on the calendar this week to get into a couple more things? Is that okay with you?
Yeah. We can pick this up.
Okay. I think the Neymar or the Cavani penalty thing is one of them.
Yeah.
I want to talk about. We discussed, I think, chasing ghosts. I want to get a little bit more into that. I think those are the two things that I have left. I think those are the two things that I have left that I really wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah. All right. That's cool. What day works for you?
Let me see. Okay.
Now, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm in Chicago.
Okay.
Although we could do this from Chicago. I could do this from Chicago if it's a must. It's not. It's.
Let me see. Tuesday is good for me. I have nothing on Tuesday afternoon or evening rather.
All right. Yeah, Tuesday it is. What time? It's got to be decently early because I do have a flight in the morning.
Okay. Maybe can we start at 6 o'clock my time? Is that too late for you? Is it 9 p.m. your time?
Yeah.
Go for an hour. It will only take an hour, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. Let me put
we'll go for about 9. That'll work for me, I guess. We'll go about an hour.
Okay.